Hello. Sorry if this video is late, but there's a lot to talk about, and I had little time to work on it. If you're new to this generation or simply don't know when I upload my videos, I try to release my videos at noon Central Daylight Time. Anyway, today we'll be beginning Gen 4. For those of you who didn't watch the first video, or simply have forgotten, this continues off from yesterday, as the PYC shifts as new Pokémon are added. So despite the fact that the 4th generation of games was released about 4 years after the 3rd, it's added to the original year cycle. Turtwig is today's topic, but before we get into that though, I want to take this opportunity to reintroduce this series to those who are joining us for Gen 4. If you just want to get into the Turtwig information, skip to the next chapter in the video. Anyway, for those of you who are new, welcome to the Pokemon Year Cycle, or PYC for short, a series where I cover a Pokemon per day. I pretend like the PYC is a real thing that began on February 27th, 1996 and has gone on to this day. Each day is a different Pokemon, and as Pokemon are added, each cycle gets longer. I start off each video introducing the Pokemon, usually adding a notable descriptor, like if the first, last, heaviest, lightest, etc., in a category or generation. If it has an alternate form with a typing I haven't talked about yet, I'll talk about that. I then talk about the Pokemon's previous 10 PYC dates, as we're in the 11th PYC, and there are more Pokemon than there are days in the Earth year. I then give my opinion on the Pokemon, usually just its design and any specific memories I have of the Pokemon and its alternate forms. I then go into the article on Bulbapedia on Pokemon Wiki. I'll get more in depth about that when I cover it today. I then watch the first scene featuring a Pokemon in the anime to the best of my ability, although it's not always its first physical appearance. I count just about any representation of the Pokemon if I can. Sometimes the scene goes on too long and has to be cut down to avoid a copyright claim. If this happens, I upload the full version on my Patreon, and will continue to do so until they implement a copyright detection system, if ever. While I don't specifically link to the Patreon version of the video, my Patreon link is at the end of my video description. Here you can watch the video for free. You don't even need to be a patron. I want to make this series available to everyone, and I don't think a copyright claim should restrict that. After watching the anime, if the Pokemon appears in the Pokemon Detective Pikachu movie, I watch the frames featuring the Pokemon to the best of my ability. There aren't many Gen 4 Pokemon, so this will be infrequent. If I have a Pokemon trading card game, TCG card featuring the Pokemon, I then talk about that. I then add who the next Pokemon with a card I have is. I then attempt to feature the opinions of others using a community post. If you have an opinion of a Pokemon, please feel free to share them on those posts, knowing that they will be featured in a video. I add 7 of them every week on Saturday, as the original idea was that I would record them a week later. But there are so few responses that I often can wait until just the day before to record that part of the video, if necessary. If no one responds, I put up this slide with Pokemon remix music in the background. Although you'll only see it once this generation, sometimes I wear special outfits to celebrate special times of the year, particularly major holidays. So I changed the logo to fit the outfit I'm wearing. I also changed the background music to computer-generated music. If you respond to the posts after I've already made the video, I plan on making YouTube Shorts covering the responses. This will be true of the fan art section as well, which is the next section of the video. Regarding the fan art section, the hope is that viewers will submit fan art by tweeting me at GreenTieTweet, and using the hashtag PYC, insert the number of the Pokemon, including a 0 at the beginning if they're before Pokemon 1000. Alternately, you can do the same on my Tumblr, although you don't necessarily need to at me. I suppose that's also true of Twitter, as I already search for the hashtag every week anyway. The images don't need to relate to me. They don't even need to be by you, as long as you credit the original artist. If I don't get any fan art, instead go to DeviantArt and cover upwards of the first page of search results for that Pokemon. I also link that art in the description. After that, I do the outro, where I start by generally thanking people who submitted fan art. I do this even if no one submits fan art, because A, I already filmed the section, B, I think it's funny. Then I talk about live streaming to get each Pokemon in their original games, except for the ones I need to wait to get in later games, particularly the alternate forms. I then talk about the next Pokemon that I'll be talking about and do my send-off. After the video, on my gaming channel, Green Gaming, I try to stream every evening or night, although the schedule will likely change due to using official Nintendo hardware rather than an emulator, to try to get that Pokemon and or any other Pokemon that I haven't gotten yet. Sometimes I find myself behind, as sometimes certain Pokemon appear after Pokemon I haven't covered, or otherwise can't be encountered without the help of those Pokemon. That works well for the first few generations, but I don't know if the newer games have set spawns like the older ones do, so I'll update this later if needed. I also don't always have time to stream particularly on Monday nights. Although, depending on how much time I have to play the games on the console I'm playing on, I might be able to stream on Monday nights if the battery life is short enough. I link to the stream in a community post and in a tweet. Sometimes, because of time-based Pokemon spawning, I will release some of these videos before noon, but I'll try to let you know when that happens. Before we get into the proper video, something I forgot to do in the last generation, that I want to do in this generation, is introduce Squirtle. Within the established lore, he comes from the Pokemon world and has somehow entered our world. His first appearance was the Magby video. He doesn't speak, but his thoughts are displayed through thought bubbles. He usually doesn't have any input, but will express particular thoughts on things, sometimes acting as a replacement for the editor's note. Now let's get into the Turtwig video. Turtwig is the first Pokemon introduced in Gen 4. As such, it's also the first Grass-type Pokemon. Base Pokemon to evolve, and first Grass-type base Pokemon introduced in Gen 4. It's also the heaviest starter as of the filming of this. Its previous BYC dates are March 19th, 1997, January 8th, 2000, October 29th, 2002, August 19th, 2005, June 9th, 2008, March 31st, 2011, January 19th, 2014, November 9th, 2016, August 31st, 2019, and June 21st, 2022. I most know Turtwig as Ash Ketchum's Pokemon in the Gen 4 era of the anime. I also know Turtwig as my player Pokemon in Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon. And I started Pokemon of the rival in Pokemon Burl, the latter of whom I named Lewis for some reason. While Turtwig's design is reminiscent of Bulbasaur, with a plant growing out of its body, and Chikorita with the plant growing out of its head, Turtwig still manages to feel unique. Anyway, let's get into the Bulbapedia article. Hello and welcome to the Bulbapedia section of the video. If you are new here, what we do is we skip this top stuff, and normally we'd skip this top box here, but I will explain it. For this one, so it says for Pokemon Go information on the species, the game section. Then you've got number 386 Deoxys. That was yesterday's video and the last one of the Pokedex, and the Pokemon that we're on. And then number 388 Grottle. That's going to be tomorrow's Pokemon and the next one in the Pokedex. This article is about the species for a specific instance of the species. See Turtwig disambiguation. So, you may have noticed I highlighted that box there. I only highlight pieces of the article that I'll be reading, so you know what I'm reading. Then we go to this info box here. I'll read all of these things, except for the external links. And then I'll go back up to the main article here. So, Turtwig is the tiny leaf Pokemon. Its number is 0387. This is what it looks like. Its type is grass. I will point out the tricolor border here. In the future, I'll only do this when it's a brand new typing to the series. On this page, all three of the greens represent the grass type, but if it had dual typing, the primary two colors would be the first type, and the secondary typing would be this outer border here. Abilities, Overgrow, and Shell Armor is its hidden ability. Abilities are traits that Pokemon have that correspond to an advantage they have in the games. Sometimes there's more than one, this one just has the one. And the hidden ability, I don't really know what that means entirely. I assume that's just one that the player doesn't know about. Gender ratios, 87.5% male or 12.5% female. You may notice that's not actually a ratio, that just is the percentages. The actual ratio is 7 males to 1 female. Catch rate is 45 or 11.9%. I will read this note here. It says, when an ordinary Pokeball is thrown at full health in Gen 7. So, normally I wouldn't read that. I'm going to read it for this one. And that's how the percentage is determined. Breeding, a group's monster and grass hatch time 20 cycles. A cycle is a set of steps that it takes to hatch an egg, but that number of steps varies from generation to generation. In Gen 4, it was 255 steps. In that generation, it was 5,100 steps. The only time I'm going to mention what a cycle is, I'm not going to do all the math for all of them. Height is 1'4" or 0.4 meters. Weight is 22.5 pounds or 10.2 kilograms. So I will always read the two different units, both the imperial and the metric. Basic experience yield is 64 in Gen 4 and 64 in Gen 5. Plus, I don't really know why they separated it into two categories. Gen 4 is new here. It's just going to be Gen 4 this entire generation. Unless they do combine them at some point, I don't know. But yeah, prior to this generation, it would say like 1 to 4, 2 to 4, 3 to 4. Basic experience yield is the average amount of experience that you can get from defeating the Pokemon. Experience is also called EXP, and helps them level up. Leveling rate is medium slow. So leveling rate is how fast it takes for the Pokemon to level up, particularly to, I think, 50 or 100. So in this case, it doesn't take too long for it to level up, but it does take some time. EV yield. EV yield is highlighted separately from the info, as this is something I had to reread, which often results in the reread text being on a different location on the screen. Don't really know what effort value is, but its total is 1 in attack. Sometimes there's more than 1 in a category, or 1 or more in different categories. You may have also noticed that I highlighted the entire box instead of just EV yield total 1 and 1 attack. That's because I found that it just looks better than cutting it down, even though I don't mention any of the zeros. Shape is that, footprint is that. Sometimes the Pokemon don't have feet, so they don't have a footprint, so I'll say it has no feet, so it has no footprint. Pokedex color is green. This is color that's usually accurate, but sometimes it isn't, and I will point out when it isn't. Base friendship is 70. Friendship is a value that can either go up or down, depending on how you treat your Pokemon, and whether or not you, like, white out when you no longer have Pokemon that can battle. It also might be important for some to evolve. It's not the case for this Pokemon, though. Then we get into the main article with these 3 opening paragraphs here. This first one says name, its Japanese name, its typing, and what generation it was introduced in. Then this paragraph talks about evolution, and sometimes alternate forms if it has any, or Pokemon that are related to it. Not by evolution, though. This third paragraph isn't in every article, and is used for other introductory information, including things such as whether it's a first partner Pokemon or appears on a box art, or stuff like that. Turtwig is a grass-type Pokemon introduced in Gen 4. It uses Roman numerals instead of numbers, and Gen is usually the abbreviation for generation that I use throughout the series. It evolves into Grottle starting at level 18, which evolves into Torterra starting at level 32. I added an image for Torterra, but not Grottle. I added an image for a Pokemon that I haven't yet featured in a video. For Grottle, I didn't add an image because when a Pokemon is featured in the top box and is mentioned in the highlighted section, I use that image as a reference image for the Pokemon. Along with Chimchar and Piplup, Turtwig is one of the 3 first-partner Pokemon of Sinnoh available at the beginning of Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Brilliant Diamond, and Shining Pearl. The biology section talks about its description, personality, behavioral, and location information that is known. This information mostly comes from the Pokedex entries, but will sometimes come from other sources, like the anime or the manga. Spin-off games like Pokemon Sleep. Biology. Turtwig is a small, light green, quadrupedal Pokemon resembling a turtle or tortoise. Its eyes, feet, and lower jaw are yellow. Its body is covered by a brown shell that is composed of earth. The shell has a thick black stripe and a black rim. On a healthy Turtwig, the shell should feel moist. A small seedling grows on top of a brown patch on its head. The seedling will wilt if the Pokemon becomes thirsty. So you can see that here, a Turtwig tired from thirst with its seedling wilting. While it still would have been highlighted because of needing to feature the biology header, I will highlight an image if it's relevant to a paragraph. Since it is a plant-based Pokemon, Turtwig usually nurtures itself through photosynthesis. It becomes more energetic when exposed to enough sunlight. It also drinks water, which hardens its soil-based shell. Due to its status as a first-partner Pokemon, a wild Turtwig is hard to come by and is generally found under the ownership of trainers. It has been recently seen living in the terrarium of Blueberry Academy. I should probably mention also that if it does sound like weird or unnatural, this is pretty much the first time I'm reading these articles. So yeah, this is basically a cold read. Evolution is a subsection of the biology section that covers the evolutionary line of the Pokemon that you're talking about. In this case, it's the unevolved form, Turtwig. Also, usually won't go into too much details, but if there's like a split evolution or something, it'll go into details about that. If a Pokemon doesn't evolve, it'll just say that it doesn't evolve and then show a picture of the Pokemon. So I'll read all of this, except for this part in parentheses. I'll only read that for today. There's some sections that I skip in an article because I've mentioned them in a previous evolutionary members article, but this isn't one of them. Evolution. Turtwig evolves into Grottle, which evolves into Torterra. For specifics on this Pokemon's evolution in the games, refer to Game Data, Evolution Data. This links to and is talking about a section that goes into more detail about how a Pokemon evolves. Turtwig, Grottle, Torterra. Game Data is a section that talks about a lot of stuff that relates to the games. So like the Pokedex entries, the stats, sometimes there'll be NPC appearances, and stuff like that. And the locations you can find it in both the main games and side games. And it also contains the sprites and the models. Game Data, Pokedex entries. You'll notice that it's being cut off here. That's mostly because it really depends on the length of the biology section, and if there's any other information. It's usually not this far spaced. So I will read this first sentence here, only in this video. I won't do it in any other Gen 4 ones because they all have this. This Pokemon was not available prior to Gen 4, so all of the Pokemon in Gen 4 were not available prior to Gen 4. And I'll go down so you can see more of the other Pokedex entries. You can see it's all the games of Gen 4 and their Pokedex entries, and I will read them as the Gen 4 Pokedex reads them. If you're familiar with the series, you may remember that the first 2 generations there was a male voice, which I was able to replicate with moderate accuracy. Gen 3, there was a female voice, which I did relatively okay. Certainly had the inflection more than I think the actual tonality, because I'm a man. This, however, is a completely different female voice, and I'll explain before I get into the anime section why it's a different voice, or at least partially why it's a different voice. This one is a lot more enthusiastic, shall we say. That one should be a lot easier than Gen 3's voice. However, not really right now, my voice is a little sore, but throughout the Gen 4 Pokemon Bulbapedia pages, I should be able to get it relatively okay, relatively alright. In Gen 4, Diamond, so you notice I didn't highlight the whole thing, nor did I highlight these things that says Sinnoh, number 001, and Johto, there's no number, don't really know why, it might be just because it's not in Johto, I don't really know.
Made from soil, the shell on its back hardens when it drinks water. It lives along lakes.
Pearl.
It undertakes photosynthesis with its body, making oxygen. The leaf on its head wilts if it is thirsty.
Platinum.
On a very healthy Turtwig, the shell should feel moist.
Heart Soul Silver.
Photosynthesis occurs across its body under the sun. The shell on its back is actually hardened soil.
As you can see here, I haven't scrolled all the way down to Gen 5 here, since I don't really know where my camera is. It's just safer to have a generation back. So I don't overlap the words by accident. And so for the Gen 5 entries, I won't read these again. I will just refer back to which Pokedex entry it is. The Gen 5 Pokedex entries are basically Platinum's entry, but Turtwig is now the correct casing, because they sometimes did that for some reason. They had these weird, not capital letters that are they're small capital letters. Yeah, it's weird. And now it's the proper actual casing. I will only mention the differences if there is differences, otherwise I'll just say it is Platinum's entry or whatever. If it's 3 separate entries, which it almost certainly will be starting in this generation, Black and White will almost certainly be Platinum's. If it appears in Black 2 and White 2, I think it's because it gets traded in that it has the same entry, so I don't think it's part of the regional Pokedex, I guess. So I don't think it gets a new Pokedex entry. That would be the case. If it is in the regional dex, I think it gets its own Pokedex entry. But sometimes in the past we've had Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum be the Gen 5 entries, or just Black and White's entry. And you'll notice that I said the Gen 5 Pokedex entries instead of Black and White is, or Black, White, Black 2, and White 2s is, because the Pokedex entries are all just the same. Similar situation if there was only one Pokedex entry. In Gen 6, X is Heart Gold and Soul Silver's entry, so sometimes it can be one that we've had before, sometimes it's a new one. Y is Pearl's entry, similar situation. Omega Ruby is Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and X's entry. Alpha Sapphire is Pearl and Y's entry. So in the past, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire have usually been Ruby and Sapphire's entry, but since Ruby and Sapphire are no longer part of the thing, I don't know if it's just copying X and Y's entry, or if it's it just happens to be both. I think we're just going to see as we go along here. So in Gen 7, I'll read this here for this first one, but I won't read it for future videos. This Pokemon has no Pokedex entries in Gen 7, so not all of the Pokemon will be like this, I guess just Pokedex entries in Gen 7. Gen 8, once again, I will read this note in this first one and maybe all the similar notes like it for the first time in this generation, but I won't usually read it. So, this Pokemon has no Pokedex entries in Sword and Shield. This note only appears when a game is excluded from the list. Pokemon will appear in the game Sword and Shield and will have all of them, but won't have this note, obviously, because it's in Sword and Shield. Brilliant Diamond is its diamond counterpart. Shiny Pearl is basically pearls, but slightly different, so we'll read it.
It undertakes photosynthesis with its body, making oxygen. The leaf on its head wilts if the Pokemon is thirsty.
In the past, they've more or less been the Pokedex entries found in Diamond and Pearl, which seems to be the case in this generation as well, which makes sense since it's just a remake of Diamond and Pearl. In Legends Arceus,
this Pokemon becomes more energetic the more sunlight there is. The part resembling a shell is similar to silt and is slightly damp and warm to the touch.
in Gen 9 Scarlet,
The shell on its back is made of soil. If the shell is moist to the touch, Turtwig is very healthy.
Violet,
It uses its whole body to photosynthesize when exposed to sunlight. Its shell is made from hardened soil.
So in this case, Scarlet and Violet were more or less new ones. They may have just been reworded ones from the past, but they're new enough for me to read them. But sometimes they aren't, or at least in the past they haven't been. I don't know if that's going to be the case for this generation or not. We'll have to see. So sometimes there'll be more than one. If it's in multiple of Paldea, Kitakami, Blueberry, this one just happens to be the Blueberry one. Turtwig in the Blueberry Pokedex. So this is one of the images that can appear with the Pokedex entries in the Blueberry Academy's DLC, the Indigo Disc. If the Pokemon has a Gen 7 Pokedex entry, it will also be accompanied by a separate image, and we'll cover those when we see them. So this is Turtwig in the Blueberry Academy. There seems to be 3 of them. They're very cute. Yes, very interesting model adaptations, let's say. So we'll usually talk a little bit about the image, and then I'll move on, or images. Usually mostly focusing on the ones that are these kind of images, because the Alolan ones are just kind of models in a void, maybe in a cool pose or something, or they're actually in the environment of the game. The leaf is interesting. Very flat, comparatively. Well, that might just be the lighting, I guess. You'll notice that I didn't go too far down when I did this image. I could have probably done Gen 8 as at the top of the screen and been covering it, and that would have been fine. The reason I do that is because I don't really want to go show off the game locations for some reason. I don't know if it's easier for myself or why I started doing it that way. It's just how I do it. If I can avoid it, sometimes I can't avoid showing off at least the label of game locations, but if I could do it it's kind of nice here, that I could, yeah, I try to do that. For game locations, usually I won't scroll down like this, because I don't usually read the game locations. I usually just scroll through them, and you can read them if you want to. They're almost never relevant to me, so, I'm not going to really focus on that kind of part of the game. I'm more just about the Pokemon themselves. Yes. So I'll do this, and then there's one later called Inside Games, which I say side game locations. I don't know if that was originally what it was called, but that's just been ingrained in my mind so much that it's just what I say. And there's also one called In Events, so if that's in there as well, I also skip the In Events, because there's a lot of information that I would do. This video would be twice as long if I did that. Game locations, side game locations. Even though I don't talk about what In Events is, I'll just sort of briefly explain what it is. It sort of talks about the games that it was distributed in, the event themselves, the language that it's in, the level at which the Pokemon is, and then the distribution period. So then, yeah. And then location, I guess, if there was a specific location where it was distributed. Held items. So these are items the Pokemon can have in the wild. This is referring to Legends Arceus specifically, but many other games are usually featured. This one, I guess, just doesn't have held items, except for in Legends Arceus, because I guess that makes sense because it's pretty rare in the wild. They probably didn't think to program in items for them to have. Up until, I think, the last generation, because I learned that's how held items worked. I used to say, you get, so normal, you get Oranberry 35% of the time, spoiled Apricorn 15% of the time, and grid items by level. But now I say, in normal, it has the Oranberry 35% of the time, spoiled Apricorn 15% of the time, and grid items by level. Alpha, EXP Candy S 100% of the time, Seed of Mastery 10% of the time, grid items by level. And I still have yet to be explained how this math works, and so as sort of a running joke, gag, line, whatever, I say I don't know how the math works, because I don't know how you can get 100% and 10%. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if it's they're 2 items? I haven't been explained this. It seems very foreign to me that a Pokemon can have 2 items. Is it dropped items? I still don't know. I don't know how this game works. I've never played it. Stats, base stats. So this is a list of their base stats. I don't know if it's like an average, if you find it like the lowest level in the wild or something. I'm not really sure how this works. There's also the ranges at like level 50 and level 100. You can see this note sort of explains how that's calculated. I don't read any of the range stuff or any of these notes. I will only do HP through total here. So HP 55, attack 68, defense 64, special attack 45, special defense 55, speed 31, for a total of 318. So you may have noticed that I highlighted the entire box, except when I was explaining how I just talk about this area. Even though I am technically just bringing up this one small area, it feels really weird. Kind of like the EVO thing, it looks kind of weird if I just highlight that one specific area. I don't know if it is that weird. It just kind of looks weird to me. Maybe it'd be more helpful for the people. You know, let me know. For stats specifically, I will usually try to keep my video, so I can actually see my video in like a preview, but it's much less convenient for me to do that, but I will do it for this because I'm nice. I will usually put it under my box to give myself enough room to be able to say stats, base stats, and all that. But for things like Pokeathlon stats, and the next section after this, type effectiveness, varies. Sometimes they'll be on like the bottom, like this. I'll probably rate it like it's on the bottom here. But sometimes I'll like actually scroll down and like figure it out through my preview of where it should be to make sure that I'm not covering it up. And while I am still gonna keep the whole box, sometimes if I mess something up, like I say the wrong attack name or something, I'll just highlight the specific part that I've referred to, because I don't entirely know where it is, and sometimes it just feels like the scroll is not consistent between read-throughs, so I like to just make sure that you know what I'm talking about. Pokeathlon stats, I'm not entirely sure what this is. It's something that was introduced at some point in the DS era, so either this generation or the next generation. I don't read them because I don't really understand what they mean. But I do acknowledge it. I say Pokeathlon stats, and then I move on to the next section. Type effectiveness. Normally I won't read this note at the top here, but I will since it's a new generation. Under normal battle conditions in Gen 9, this Pokemon is, and then it goes into each of the different things. What is damaged normally by, weak to, immune to, and resistant to. That's how, these like the multipliers for the game to figure out how much hit points or HP should be taken off. 1 times, I don't acknowledge the 1 times, I just say damage normally by, and then normal fighting, rock, ghost, steel, psychic, dragon, dark, and fairy. But for weak to and resistant to, I don't say 2 times or half times, I say double and half respectively. Sometimes there's more than 1, sometimes there's times 4s, or like a fourth of the, a fourth or something. And I think that's exclusively for the dual types though. So this is weak to flying, poison, bug, fire, and ice, all for double. Immune to nothing, so I say nothing instead of none. I don't really know why, it's just something I started doing and I've done it ever since, so. Resistance to ground, water, grass, and electric, all for half. So sometimes there are notes under these, and I'll get back to that when we do find one has a note. I'll explain that again, that I do read that. Yeah. Let's set first. What I do is I will always scroll up, when I set as top as I can, or my camera is just right below it. So when I do this, I don't read Generation 9 or other generations, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I also only read the level and the move name. Unless there's only 1 move, then I'll read the whole line. 1 tackle, 5 withdraw, 9 absorb, 13 razor leaf, 17 curse, 21 bite, 25 mega drain, 29 leech seed, 33 synthesis, 37 crunch, 41 giga drain, and 45 leaf storm. I also don't read these notes. By TM is a similar situation for how I frame it. I usually try to get as close to my camera as I can. TM stands for technical machine. These are 1-use moves that you can teach a Pokemon. So, again, generation name, or the other generations, or anything, type through PP. I only read the TM and move, and for TM, I just will say TM 001 for the first run, and then I'll just say 5, 7, 20, etc. Also, I will only cover the TMs in the base form of the Pokemon, with a few exceptions, but I'll get to those when we get to them, because presumably most, if not all, of these TMs also apply to their evolution, with the exception if the evolution has a different typing than its original, because that might be different TMs than the other typings does, so we'll do that then. TM 001, Takedown, 5 Mudslap, 7 Protect, 20 Trailblaze, 25 Facade, 28 Bulldoze,
33 Magical Leaf, 35 Mudshot, 47 Endure, 49 Sunny Day, 56 Bullet Seed, 59 Zen Headbutt. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it'll even happen in the leveling up if there's enough leveling ups. I just knew the bottom line was the end of the box. I've read so many of these that I just know it by now. But yeah, I'll start from the top here because I know that my camera is not covering up the 66, so I just go all the way to the top here. So 66 Body Slam, 70 Sleep Talk, 71 Seed Bomb, 74 Reflect, 75 Light Screen, 81 Grass Knot, 85 Rest, 88 Swords Dance, 99 Iron Head, 103 Substitute, 108 Crunch, 111 Giga Drain, 116 Stealth Rock, 119 Energy Ball, 121 Heavy Slam, 128 Amnesia, 133 Earth Power, 137 Grassy Terrain, 146 Grass Pledge, 159 Leaf Storm. When I get to the end of a box like this, instead of going to the top where I was, which would be 168 the Solar Beam here, I go to the bottom, because it's easier for me to not have to highlight it, and presumably you'll have followed along long enough to know where we still are. 159 Leaf Storm, 168 Solar Beam, 171 Terra Blast, 172 Roar, 176 Sand Tomb, 179 Smackdown, 194 Grassy Glide, 204 Double Edge, and 224 Curse. By breeding, so what we do is, we'll ignore this top part again, but we read, if they're in a group here, we'll say this group gives you, and the move, we'll say the name of the Pokemon and say it gives you the move. When I do by breeding, I will only do it in the base form. I won't do it in any of the evolutions, regardless of their typing. So, in this case, we got this group gives you Double Edge, this group gives you Growth. So this I do generally scroll down to where it's close to the top of my camera, because I don't really know where my camera is. So, this group gives it Shell Smash, Victory Bell gives it Spit Up, this group gives it Stockpile, this group gives it Superpower, this group gives it Swallow, this group gives it Thrash, Lotad gives it Tickle. This asterisk means that it has to be chain bred, which I think is multiple generations or something. I don't really understand what chain breeding is. So I will say Lotad gives it Tickle through chain breeding. That's how I would normally phrase that. This group gives it Wide Guard, and this group gives it Worry Seed. Again, I go to the bottom if I can. TCG only moves. TCG only moves refers to moves that has exclusively in the TCG, or at least in the TCG, and not the video games. This has Rollout on this card and Stomp on this card. I don't say the actual card's name, because sometimes I don't know how it's pronounced. Side game data, so I don't read any of this except for a few pieces, but I'll get to them as we go here. I just scroll through them like this, although usually much faster. So this is one of them. The Pokemon Ranger series, or really anyone that has like a Pokédex-like entry, I will read it in the Pokédex entry voice. So, Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia in the browser entry. And I'll say browser entry R052. It attacks by spinning leaves and seeds.
Guardian Signs.
It creates spines around itself that make Pokemon stop.
It's got all this. Okay, then Pokepark Wii, Pikachu's Adventure in the Pokepark pad entry.
Turtwig often plays in the middle zone. He played Bulbasaur's Daring Dash to save Chikorita.
So you can see that I don't highlight the image for some reason. I don't really remember why I don't do that. Yeah. Got all this. Costumes in Pokemon Go. Sometimes this will be a thing when there's, like, has costumes in Pokemon Go, like, little things like hats and stuff. So, like, in this case, it has the Lucas hat and the Dawn hat. These are two hats worn by two of the default characters in the games. Evolution data. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the one that goes into more details about how the Pokemon evolves. So, Turtwig, level 18. Grottle, level 32. Torterra, these are the symbols for the rare candy, which levels up your Pokemon instantly. We got sprites here, which show off the primary sprites / models in the games. You'll also notice that I don't highlight any of the sprites, as it's just a long list of sprites and models. So I will read this note in this first video, but not in future videos. So this Pokemon was unavailable prior to Gen 4. In Gen 4, you've got, you know, these nice images, higher quality than we've ever had before. Looks like it might be a little different in Platinums, which is interesting. Even more slightly different in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Maybe it sort of splits the difference, I don't know. So the shiny blue replaces that kind of green. The leaf seems to be darker as well, so it seems to be the shell and the head. Interesting. In Gen 5, we have the full back sprites. Gen 6, we have the models. Pretty good adaptation, I'd say. Gen 7, not too much changes in the models. Well, yeah, the eyes also seemingly get quite a bit smaller. Colors might also be slightly different. In Gen 8, in this game, got these kind of models.
Let's see how they're a little bit bigger. So you'll notice here that's also missing the Sword and Shield and Brilliant Diamond, Shiny Pearl, and the Gen 9 models here. This is pretty normal. For some reason they don't have it. I don't know if it's because of a lack of like resources, like these have been like extracted from something, or if maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's too difficult to get high quality screenshots, I don't know. Cross-generation home, we've got these models. Normally I wouldn't say cross-generation, I would just say home. Maybe like a yellow now. I don't really know what it changed. I mean, kind of seems like it was always intended to be a yellow, but like it was properly, I guess, made a yellow in the models. Interesting. So other sprites is for these sort of variety of any thing that it can be. So this is Speedy in Pokemon Super Contests. So these are things, I guess, I presume in Gen 4. I guess you can have all these different decorations on them. I'm thinking this is maybe an NPC, one that you like face in the contests. Sometimes it's like unused back sprites or intro sprites or something like that. In animation refers to anything that's in the anime or any sort of animation project that is official Pokemon. Mainly the main anime, the main series. Used to be called In the Anime, but now it's been changed to In Animation. Gen 1 and many early Gen 2 videos that I have called it In the Anime still. This covers the appearances of the Turtwig in the various media that are animated, and the notable ones, and other random ones that appear. I also don't read any of this. I acknowledge, like, Ash's Turtwig and Paul's Turtwig, and I'll read the description on this image here, like I'll acknowledge the image, but I skip through all of this. Much like the data, like, I don't have time to read all of this. I just, don't. I'm already behind as is. Turtwig and Pokemon, the series, Diamond and Pearl. Others, minor appearances. Pokédex entries is a subsection that I read, and I will go through each of these segments. So it's the episode, Pokemon, source, and entry. So it's Diamond and Pearl, episode 5, about Turtwig. I usually won't say who the subject is, unless it's something special. In Ash's Pokédex, Turtwig, the tiny leaf Pokemon! Its shell is made of earth, and when it absorbs water, it becomes harder. I read it in my impression of the Pokédex voice of the era in which the episode is in, but I do sometimes have to use some of my earlier impressions, or if I'm lucky and have the opportunity to listen to a future Pokédex's voice, or if I'm lucky and have the opportunity to listen to a future Pokédex's voice, I'll read it in that voice, if it applies. Gotcha, Pokemon Evolutions, again, I don't read these, but I'll kind of acknowledge them. Sometimes you got all this. In the manga, this refers to any appearances it has in the various manga versions of the franchise, the main one being Pokemon Adventures. So I don't read all of this information. Sometimes I'll say like the headings, but that's usually, there's like a couple of them or something. And maybe there's images or maybe something that associated with it like that. So in the manga, Turtwig and Pokemon Adventures. So, it looks like it's maybe with a Munchlax. Got all this. In the TCG and in the TFG, I usually sort of skip over these because they're only like this article or like one little note. The reason why I skip over the TFG, which is the trading figure game, is I don't know enough about it. Other appearances refers to Pokemon's appearances in various other things, like other spin-off games, and sometimes music videos, movies, online shorts, and things like that. Other appearances, Turtwig appears in Super Smash Bros. Brawl as a trophy. Trophy information. So those of you who are familiar with this series will be familiar with the voice that I use for this. Even though the voice I use in the Pokédex entry has changed, and quite logically, the opposite should be a very unenthusiastic male voice. I'm not going to do that ridiculously over-the-top British person accent that I have, because I think it's funny. You'll also notice that I added the image next to this section. Sometimes the section will have the image, but when it doesn't, I will add it. Similarly, if it's referring to a Pokemon that appears actually physically in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and it doesn't have an image, I will typically try to find a video of them doing their move or whatever, or Super Smash Bros. A tiny leaf Pokemon. Despite its animal appearance, Turtwig actually has vegetation sprouting from its head. The shell on its back is made of soil and hardens when it drinks water. Much like a plant, Turtwig performs photosynthesis, absorbing sunlight and making oxygen. It also relies heavily on water to keep its plant healthy, and thus spends a lot of time near lakes. Turtwig evolves into Grottle. Trivia, this is basically just for miscellaneous other facts about it. Sometimes it will mention something we've already talked about, or will be covered in the origin or name origin sections. I'll still probably read the points anyway. Turtwig is the heaviest of the basic forms of all of the first partner Pokemon. It also has the lowest base speed stat out of all first partner Pokemon. Turtwig is the only first partner Pokemon to know a stat-raising move when initially received as a player's first Pokemon. Turtwig is the only grass-type first partner Pokemon to learn a water-type move by level up, that being Withdraw. Origin. This is a subsection that covers the origin of it very briefly, or speculated origin of it. You can also see there's this Bulbanews box here, so it says Bulbanews has an article related to the subject on the origin of species, Turtwig, Grottle, and Torterra. I usually don't acknowledge this box at all. If you want to read more about it, you gotta go to the page, I guess. Turtwig seems to be based on a terrestrial turtle, possibly one of the Asian box turtles. In concept, it may be based on the world turtle from various mythologies that carries the world upon its back. Name origin is a subsection talking about the origin or speculated origin of the Pokemon's name. Name origin, Turtwig may be a combination of turtle and twig. Nidal may be a combination of Nigh, sprout, and turtle. Now the languages, I don't read any of this, I just sort of acknowledge it and move on. See also often shows specific examples of Turtwig and other related pages. External links either be these boxes here, or sometimes they'll have like the links to other websites, which I think is actually the purpose of the external links. They just happen to be at the end of the article, so they end up more often than not being in the external links section. You got the box here for the first partner trios, and we're here in Sinnoh. Got all these. This box is basically like the box we saw at the beginning, you know, shows the last Pokemon and the next Pokemon. And again, I don't acknowledge it. Then I don't acknowledge this Project Pokedex box or the categories. Then I say, let's move on.
Before we get into the anime section, while it won't be too relevant for this video, I feel I should explain something that I've alluded to in the past in this series. For those of you who didn't watch the anime before the Gen 4 era, or haven't watched the anime since before the last season of the Gen 3 era, starting in the final season of the Gen 3 era of the anime, 4Kids, the company that had been producing the English dub of the anime, was dropped as the dubbing company in favor of the Pokemon company doing the dubbing themselves. However, due to contractual obligations, most of the cast could not return as their characters, meaning most of the cast had to be replaced. The reason I say most is that most, if not all Pokemon that share its English and Japanese name, were voiced by the Japanese actors, meaning they weren't replaced. This is most notable in Pikachu, whose voice actress continued to play Ash's Pikachu. Also, something I hadn't noticed before watching the Gen 4 era of the anime for this project was that they brought back the original narrator, who remained on the series until the end of Ash's series. Toward the beginning of the Gen 3 era of the anime, the narrator left the project, and presumably 4Kids. I hadn't noticed due to how similar they sound, particularly if you're under the impression that the voice actors have changed in the decade or so of doing the series. It was such an incredible shock to hear the original narrator introducing the episode. As mentioned earlier, you won't get the new voices, or at least the new voices playing pre-existing characters, in the scene we'll be watching today, but you'll inevitably hear them in the coming days.
Hello and welcome to the anime portion of the video. Today we are watching 467, Following a Maiden's Voyage. In this episode, we have been introduced to Dawn here, who is just had her 10th birthday and is about to get her Pokemon, and her mom has reminded her that she needs to deliver a postcard to get her starter Pokemon. Yeah.
I'd never forget this.
We got
Good.
Turtwig there.
So, have you decided which of those 3 Pokemon you're going to pick?
Not
That's
yet.
her mom.
They're all so cute. Thing is, I'm sure that any of them would make an awesome partner. I've gotta be smart, though. I want to be a top...
Okay, that is Turtwig's first scene in the anime. Let's move on.
Now let's talk about the TCG. As I mentioned in the Rayquaza video, I have a card featuring Turtwig, but I'll have to wait until I've talked about Lucario before I can cover it. The next Pokemon with the card I'll be talking about is Torterra. Now let's see why other people love Turtwig.
Hello and welcome to the community post section of the video. The question is, what do you love about Turtwig? And for the first time, we don't only just have multiple comments, but we also have someone responding to a comment, so that's nice. So, Huckahuck has said, Turtwig is a turtle and turtles rock. And Beast Boy 2K4 has responded, for real, for real. They also left their own comment saying, he's just a cute baby. Very nice. Thank you for your responses. Let's move on.
Now let's look at fan art.
So, nobody sent in fan art, which thus far has only happened. Thus far, no one has sent in fan art. What I do is I go through these images. I'll like zoom in and talk about each one until we either find an image that doesn't contain a Trico or at the end of the page, whichever comes first. This is Bells by May Drawing. So you've got this nice sort of classic design of these Pokemon here. Feels like they almost belong in Legends Arceus. We've got a Zigzagoon here, just like this. A Turtwig, just like this. A Go-Goat, just like that. It kind of looks like that might be like a Salazzle or something. Says Hatmaker and Dopey Chef. Something hides bread in it, I think. Eyes, so you can see this kind of eye pattern. Something pattern. There's the eyes, I guess. Yes. It's a very well done piece of art. I got thanks to Daz Tim by USV02. So I don't know if this is like a commission that someone named Daz Tim made, or if they helped them out with this image, or maybe the outfit or something. Yeah, very well done. Then we've got Turtwig Autumn by Angel Rose Star. So this fun alternate version of Turtwig here that has a maple leaf rather than the other kind of leaf it has. And it's more oranges and reds, kind of like fall colors. Then we've got Turtwig Up Close by Angel Rose Star. So you got this nice up close image of a Turtwig here. Then we've got Turtwig & Co. by Zerudez. So you've got this Turtwig here being followed by these Badoo here and the Starly, I guess, kind of wondering what's going on. Then we got Turtwig by Riley Kitty, this cute image of a Turtwig here eating these leaves in this desert here. So then we've got Turtwig Evolution Line by Predo. So it's got these three images here. We'll go through all of them since they all contain Turtwig. We've got Turtwig, Grottle, Torterra, that's the whole line. Very nice, well done image. Then we've got the sketch version, showing off all that. Then we've got the sort of flat version, where doesn't have the background or all the shiny details yet. Number 256, Pokemon Evolution Line, Down to Earth by Imaz Arts. This nice image of a Turtwig evolutionary line here. So Turtwig, Grottle, and Torterra here playing in the grass. Very well done. Then we've got PMD Pro Tag, doesn't know anything about Pokemon, by 5-9 squared. Alright, 5e, let's go. Why are you looking at me like that? Oh my fucking god, he is on fire. Then we've got Turtwig Strikes Back by Charles Shadow. This interesting, kind of simplified art of Turtwig here. Kind of looking up. We got a couple other images. Like it's looking up at a rainbow here. And we got all the hearts around it. Yeah, very well done. Then we've got Da de los Muertos by Calvin Hobbes Holmes. So I've got these evolution line, Turtwig, Grottle, and Torterra just up for the Day of the Dead. Yes. And this sort of, I guess, parade, like I'm guessing, or whatever this is. I'm not too familiar with the culture. Yeah. Very well done. Then we've got Turtwig by Evil Apple, 513. So this cute image of a Turtwig here being hit by, like, dew, I guess. This is my favorite Digimon from Pal World, Woodnap94. So this is a joke image referencing how the game Pal World was accused of taking assets and general design ideas from both Digimon and Pokemon. Then we've got The Doctor at Work by Fushigi Seeds. We've got, I guess, this veterinarian, this Pokemon veterinarian. He seems to be measuring the weight of this Turtwig here. Then he's playing with this Aaron here. Playing with this shiny Litten, I'm guessing is what that is. And the Solosis, I guess it's his assistant or something. Yes, very well done. Then we've got Turtwig by Scary Tales. So this nice image of a Turtwig here. Very well done. Then we've got Turtwig by It's Scrollic XD. So you've got this slightly stylized Turtwig here. It's like it could be like a poster or something. Turtwig, number 387, Tiny Leaf Pokemon. Or like an info card or something. Then we've got Twig and Turtwig by F74. So it's a Turtwig and then Natal. This Turtwig looking at this twig here. It's very cute. USV02 is this nice gif of this Turtwig saying hi in this cute little outfit. Yes, very well done. Turtwig's Coerced Interrogation by Omnix2. So we've got this Turtwig here. I guess it's being interrogated for something, and it's, I guess it's it's being tickled by a feather, so that's, I guess, an effort to talk. Then we've got Grass Starters by Clockbirds. I'm pretty sure we've done this one in one of the Grass Starters before, or maybe multiple of them. But yeah, we've got the first 7 generations of Grass Starters here. So Bulbasaur, Chikorita, Trico, Turtwig, Snivy, Chespin, and Rowlet here. They seem to be picking berries and bringing them to the ground. Yeah, very nice. The berries seem to be the Pecha Berry, the Oran Berry, and I think maybe the Raspberry. Flora Babies by Joanne Zell. So the first 6 generations of Grass Starters. Bulbasaur, Chikorita, Trico, Turtwig, Snivy, and Chespin. So playing, I guess, and kind of cuddling and playing, and it's very well done. None of these images contains a Turtwig, so we'll move on.
Thanks to everyone who's been a fan art. But before I do my send-off, you notice that after the send-off, there will be an end screen with the same background as the one I used when people don't respond to the community post, with a link to the PYC playlist and the previous and next videos in the series. This only appears in videos labeled not for kids, as they contain violent swearing or suggestive scenes. Anyway, tomorrow I'll be talking about Grottle. As always, this is my proper outfit, and I'll see you tomorrow.